Hi, nerd. Are you ready to talk about the great poop experiment of 2022? I hope you are, because otherwise you're watching the wrong video. You should go check out one of my other gazillions of videos. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about an experiment that I have had in the works for this channel for quite some time. I'm really excited about the information that I'm hoping you guys will glean from me volunteering my body for science. Stay tuned. I'm going to tell you about the experimental design, and in future videos we're going to go into detail on each of these prebiotics and what they did to my microbiome. Okay, that being said, I will point out first and foremost, I'm not going to tell you about the data in this video because the experiment is still ongoing. So if you're hoping to glean insight about what the prebiotics did, I'm sorry, that's going to be for another video. This video is really just for the nerds, the people who want to hear about the experimental design and how I'm going to be conducting this research. And you can reference this back once I start publishing the videos about the different prebiotics. So I'm not going to be offended if this one has lower views than normal. I know it will, because again, not everybody's going to be a super nerd like me. But if you are a super nerd, if I haven't scared you away yet, let me run you through the basic gist of the Great Poop Experiment. So one of the things that we talk about an awful lot on my podcast, on this channel, in Facebook groups, to a degree in functional medicine, although I wish it was more commonplace, we talk about trying to target your microbiome with prebiotics and probiotics, right? So if we see low akkermansia on a stool test, we might be inclined to recommend polyphenols. If we see low bifidobacterium on a stool test, we might be inclined to recommend high FODMAP foods. Now, some of these prebiotic substances are relatively well researched and we have the data to support those claims, like the two that I just mentioned, but then sometimes it's a little bit grayer, it's a little bit more up in the air. And there's a lot of conversation happening online about like, hey, I tried this prebiotic and it didn't boost this microbe. So I think that we're still very much in the infancy of microbiome research. I do think I was a researcher in like a previous life, but in this life I'm a clinician, so this is kind of my hybrid of the two worlds. So what I thought was, you know what? I have a microbiome. I like taking prebiotics. I could do some stool tests. Stool tests are relatively affordable now that we have something like Ombre, which was previously called Thrive. You know, you could do one of those stool tests for give or take $100 and get a decent amount of information about your microbiome, particularly the good bacteria and maybe to some extent the bad bacteria. So basically what I've done is I have purchased, I kid you not, 50 Ombre stool tests. It's a very weird year. What can I say? I have 50 stool test kits that I am going to be mailing off between now and the end of the year to Ombre, and I'm going to be assessing my microbiome as I do different challenges with prebiotics. So the rough experimental design, I'm going to use pink to represent like a baseline or a washout period, and I'm going to use green to represent when I'm taking a prebiotic. So the kind of gist is that I started off, my first assessment was after a lifetime essentially of a baseline. I wasn't taking any prebiotics. I discontinued any prebiotics or probiotics I was taking. I was really just kind of living normal life at this point. And that's where we start off. And I did my first, sorry, obnoxious marker noise. It was right here that I did my first 3 stool samples. Now you might be asking, why 3? That seems redundant and wasteful. Because stool is not homogeneous. When we test stool, we kind of almost expect it to be like this homogeneous substance. I'm just going to use 2 colors for the sake of simplicity here. We kind of have this assumption that everything's going to be evenly spread throughout the stool sample, and that you could sample a stool on the same day or even the same week and get pretty much the same data. Unfortunately, that's not really true. When you look at it, stool is much more of a patchwork quilt where you get pockets of some bacteria and pockets of other bacteria. So sometimes you hit a pocket that has no akkermansia. Sometimes you hit a pocket that has a decent amount of akkermansia. Sometimes you hit a pocket that has very little fecalibacterium. Sometimes you hit a pocket that has a decent amount. So by doing 3 samples each time I collect, so I do 3 consecutive days, at each point where I'm doing the data collection, I'm trying to minimize that noise from just the fact that it's it's not a homogeneous substance that I'm looking at here. The other thing that I'm trying to do, and this might be TMI, but whatever, you're watching this video, so here you are. In the ombre instructions, they tell you to have your bowel movement, wipe as you normally would, and then just use the little like Q-tip thing to just wipe up the little bit of fecal material from the toilet paper after you wipe, and then you're using that for the sample. I don't think that's the best way to collect. I don't think that that's going to get you the most representative sample of the microbiome. So for the purposes of what I'm doing, what I'm actually doing, and I'll use this pink color just so we have a little bit of contrast, what I'm doing is, and again, this is TMI, but you could have turned back already. I'm essentially catching the poop with my hand with toilet paper and I'm being hygienic about it, but I'm basically getting the poo on my hand and I'm taking the little Q-tip thing and I'm poking it in multiple locations, like 8 to 10 locations across that sample, and then throwing it back in the bowl. And that's what I'm using for my sample. And again, the reasoning is I'm figuring that way, all right, I'm going to get a pocket that's more green. I'm going to get a pocket that's right in the brown. I'm going to get a pocket over here, a pocket over here. I'm hoping that if I do sampling from multiple areas on the stool sample, that likewise, it's going to appear more like a homogeneous sample. And so far that seems like it's working out pretty well. I've got 3 data set points back in right now, or rather 3 data collections back in. And so far there doesn't seem to be a ton of statistical noise in the data that I'm getting, which is really, really great. But anyway, so 3 samples each time for this reason. Then after, again, this was like my baseline. This was me not doing anything special. I had made an effort to discontinue most of my prebiotics and probiotics with 1 or 2 notable exceptions that I'll talk about in that video. But really, this was just me living my life, me normal. Then I did 2 weeks of my first prebiotic, Glucomannan. I chose that one in part because I was deeply curious and in part because there isn't as much research that I was finding, and there wasn't as much talk on the forums about what it could do for the microbiome. I know the probiotic advisor, Jason Hawryluk, has that in his stuff a little bit, but like I wasn't seeing a ton of compelling research on that prebiotic specifically, and I had never tried it, so I figured, why the heck not? I'm going to give it a go. And I had a bottle that had just expired, so I figured I should try to use it. So I did 2 weeks of the Glucomannan. Then at the end of the 2-week period, I did my next set of 3 stool samples. The other nice thing about doing 3 is I'm minimizing statistical noise every time I have a data point, and I'm taking the average at each time point. The other thing is that sometimes shit happens. I had to do that. I had to throw that in there. But seriously, sometimes shit happens and your stool sample gets lost in the mail or something happens to it or the container leaks. So I only have 2 data points here for the Glucomannan experiment because one of them arrived damaged when it got to the lab, and Ombre had to email me and say, hey, we're really sorry, one of them arrived damaged. So at least I still had the 2 data points. I can't imagine if I had only done 1 and then the 1 got damaged and I had already moved on to the next part of the experiment. So that's another good part about doing it this way. Okay, so I did 2 weeks of Glucomannan. Then, you guessed it, I had to go back to a baseline. So the way that I'm kind of thinking of it, at least, is both probiotics and prebiotics, to a large extent, are going to manipulate your microbiome when you're taking them. Now, the hope, particularly if we're trying to inhibit pathogens like hydrogen sulfide producers or proteobacteria or E. coli or Klebsiella, the hope is that feeding the good guys for a period of time, maybe weeks or months, will inhibit the bad guys until you're able to diversify your diet and maintain that inhibition with your diet. So I realize like it might be a bummer hearing me say that once you discontinue the prebiotics, the effect might wear off. But the whole point is that we could use these strategically to get you to a point where a healthy diet and healthy lifestyle can maintain the progress that you've gained. And if you are like me, if you have had a million gazillion antibiotics in your lifetime and you know you need to keep your microbiome healthy, you could keep prebiotics in as kind of a just an overall health strategy. Like, you can keep them in forever. I just find that most people don't want to take supplements forever. So there needs to be some sort of like off-ramp strategy for the majority of people. But that being said, my curiosity is, all right, say that we have a bacteria. Let's say bifidobacterium. Let's say my bifidobacterium started at whatever my baseline level was. It's not great. Then let's say, hypothetically, this is not reflective of the Glucomannan data because I haven't crunched the numbers yet, but let's say my bifidobacteria went up after taking one of the prebiotics. We would think, hey, that's really amazing and cool, yay. But if I just rolled back into the next prebiotic, like if I went right from Glucomannan to PHGG, we wouldn't know what effect was due to discontinuing the one prebiotic and what was due to introducing the new one, right? So I want to see, all right, if something went up or down with the introduction of a prebiotic, did it go back to a normal baseline at the end of the washout period, the new baseline? Like after 2 weeks without Glucomannan, did the numbers go back to where they were or close to where they were? And then that gives me the new starting point where then I could judge the effectiveness of the next prebiotic. So what I'm curious is to see if there are these trends of like, all right, say you started a baseline, then I take Glucomannan and that number changes, and then I go back to a baseline or a washout period. Does it go back? Or is there a lingering effect? And similarly, I need the so in this case, for example, so the first green section is Glucomannan. I'll just label it with G. The next one that I'm just wrapping up now is PHGG, which a lot of you guys know about because of SIBO. So I need to have that pre-PHGG data to make sense of the changes that I see with PHGG. And that brings us up to the current day. Today was actually the first day of sampling after 2 weeks on partially hydrolyzed guarga. So that's where I'm at today. Then I'm going to enter into, you guessed it, another 2-week washout period. Because again, I need to see if the numbers go back to the baseline, or I at least, at the bare minimum, even if they don't go back to baseline, I at least need to have a new baseline established before I start my new prebiotic. So that's kind of the idea there. So we're essentially doing baseline, prebiotic, baseline, prebiotic, baseline, prebiotic, and I have enough kits and I have enough prebiotics that I'm going to do this through until the end of the year. So if you're watching this video a little bit later, don't worry, more of them are coming out. But because of the experimental design where I'm doing 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, and then I have to mail the data into Ombre, each chunk, each part of the experiment takes about a month to complete. So right now, I'm all the way up here where I'm doing the collection for PHGG, and I'm just now getting this data back from the washout period from a couple weeks ago. So I'm a little bit behind in the data interpretation of it. So basically, I'm thinking I'm going to be posting videos on this through until about the new year, maybe into January of 2023. But by the end of this, I want to have a decent understanding of what kind of things did we see when I took Glucomannan, PHGG, acacia fiber, my personal favorite, inulin. I'm going to try XOS, which is a bifidogenic prebiotic. It helps raise bifidobacteria. I'm going to try 2FL, the 2-fructo, oh crap, I forgot the name. Just Google 2FL, you'll figure it out. It's Holy Ghost is the brand here in the United States, although there are a few others now that are selling it. I feel like there might be one other that I'm forgetting right now, but hopefully it'll come back to me. But you get the idea. I've got like 7 or 8 of these, I think, if I remember correctly, lined up. Now the question is, I'm still not convinced which one I should do next. So if you have a strong opinion on that, leave a comment down below, because like I said, I'm entering a 2-week washout period right now. So as of right now, I have not chosen the next prebiotic that I'm going to do. If you're really itching to find out about one, if you're like, OMG, I need to find out about 2FL, or OMG, I need to find out about inulin, please, for the love of God, do inulin right now. Let me know, and that could actually sway my decision, because I'm kind of still on the fence of which one I want to do next. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention in this video is twofold. There's 2 more things I wanted to mention. I think that I'm the perfect candidate and I'm the worst candidate to do this experiment on myself. Really, it comes down to, I don't think I could convince any other sane human being to do this. Like, I just have to do it myself for this channel. Like, I can't volunteer another human being to do this kind of experiment willingly. But the other thing is, my microbiome probably looks somewhat similar to your guys's. Now, a lot of you guys know my story. I had IBS. Looking back, I think I had SIBO. I know I had candida overgrowth and some parasites. And I struggled for a couple of years trying to understand why my gut was so chronically pissed off at me. I was always bloated. I actually got asked if I was pregnant once, which is like every woman's nightmare. I had frequent diarrhea and I felt like I wasn't digesting anything. So, now cut forward about 10 years, I did heal my gut. I moved past IBS. And again, what I presume was probably SIBO. And I'm in a much better place. But I will say my microbiome still looks a little iffy on paper. As you'll see in these data collection videos when it comes out, I have pretty good Akkermansia. I've got decent Faecalibacterium. Lactobacilli are okay-ish. My bifido are pretty low. Some of my butyrate producers could use some TLC. They look like they're kind of dwindling. So there's a lot of bacteria that I think could use support and TLC, primarily because I was a child at the 80s and 90s, and I had all the antibiotics for all the things all my life. Like I had ear infections, I had sinus infections, I had surgeries, I had all sorts of antibiotics. I had Lyme disease. So I've taken a truckload of antibiotics. But this means any of the data that I'm collecting here could be really helpful for you guys. Because it would be if I was doing this video and I was like, hey, look, I took my bifidobacteria from 3% up to 10%, woo for me. You would be like, okay, lady, but I don't have 3% bifido. I have like 0.1%. So what does this actually mean to me? I actually have like 0.1% bifido as a normal kind of baseline. So I'm right there in the trenches with you. My microbiome looks like it needs some help, at least specifically from the bifidobacteria perspective. So the way I'm figuring it is, A, I might not have enough of the good bacteria to really feed them adequately with these prebiotics, which makes me a really lousy candidate for this. But if we do get changes, I really think that the changes that are seen in my microbiome could directly translate to what you could expect if you were to try these things. Because again, my microbiome looks remarkably similar to a lot of your guys's. So for what it's worth, I'm kind of still one of you. I've been asymptomatic and doing really well and healthy, and I've been able to eat everything minus gluten because I'm a celiac, so that's just a no-go. But I've been able to heal my gut and move past IBS despite having low bifido. But I would still like to boost that up. And I think that this is going to be a fun experiment for me to learn about my microbiome as well. The other thing that, of course, I need to mention here is that there are going to be different variables, right? So like what I've noticed so far in my data, and I'm actually thinking I might need to redo this one, which is going to stink. But I do eat somewhat seasonally with particular foods. So for example, May was strawberry season here in North Carolina, and we were getting like gallon-sized buckets of strawberries every week and just devouring all the strawberries on planet Earth. And it was amazing. But it makes me start wondering, okay, the fiber and the polyphenols, am I feeding one of the good bacteria? And then when strawberry season stopped, basically around June 1st, I discontinued them. I haven't really had strawberries in the last month or so. Now I have a little garden out on the back patio and I have a ton of basil. Well, I've been on a pesto kick. The last 2 weeks, coincidentally, when I've been doing PHGG, I've been eating pesto a couple days a week during the work week as a lunch. I've been having chickpea pasta with homemade pesto, but then now I'm wondering, I'm like, oh crap, that like there's a lot of olive oil, the nuts, the basil, like that's a totally different thing that I'm using to feed my microbiome that was not in my diet prior to the PHGG. So I'm actually thinking I'm going to do the collection for PHGG, and then I'm going to wait another week or maybe 2 and do no pesto whatsoever. And then I'm going to do another 3 because I think I might have fudged the data on this one. I also know that coming into July, we have a fig tree and my parents have a fig tree, and I'm going to be eating loads of figs. I love figs. They're one of my favorite fruits, and we have trees and it's amazing. And that's going to be a really big staple in my diet. I'm going to have like a bowl this big of figs every single day for about a month from mid to late July into August. And then we get into August and it's muscadine grape season, and we're going to be eating tons and tons of these amazing polyphenol-rich grapes. So the one downside is I'm trying to minimize the variables to the best of my ability. I'm not taking other prebiotics. I'm not taking probiotics. I'm not getting yogurt and kombucha. I'm really trying to behave myself in that perspective. But I'm realizing doing this experiment, I do tend to eat somewhat seasonally, and that could throw the data a bit. So I'm hoping that the data collection is good enough that we can glean something from it. And the pre and post testing, I think, will be extra insightful. Because like I said, from like here to maybe halfway through Glucomannan, I was eating tons of strawberries. But then I wasn't by the time I got to this washout period. So hopefully the way I'm designing it, doing the pre and post data and the actual treatment, the treatment week data, hopefully I can make sense of it despite the fluctuations in my own diet. But I'm sorry. I love you guys. I love doing this YouTube channel, but I'm not willing to not eat strawberries and figs and pesto and muscadine grapes in an abundance when they're in season. I'm willing to poop in a container and mail it off to Ombre 50 times this year for you, but I'm not willing to sacrifice my figs and my muscadine grapes and my strawberries. So gotta roll with what we've got here, but that is essentially the experimental design in a nutshell. I hope that you found this video maybe not helpful because, like I said, we didn't talk about data yet, but I hope you found it insightful. My guess is that most people will visit this video after they discover one of the other videos that I did where I reference the experimental design and doing a video on it. I don't anticipate this is going to be a super popular one on my channel unless you guys are all mega nerds. If so, cool for you. But I will see you in the next couple videos. We're going to continue with the hydrogen sulfide video series, and we're going to be doing a video about the first set of data from Glucomannan before you know it. So stay tuned for that. Hey guys, if you like this video, be sure to subscribe, ring the bell, click the like button, and leave a comment down below with the videos that you would like to see me do next. Doing all of those really helps support the channel and support my efforts in making as many videos as possible for you guys. Thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next video.